This episode, a huge thank you to the Mercantile Exchange in Pleasant Valley, North Carolina. The owner is a fan of this channel and heard I was looking for the 20th anniversary Hulk and was kind enough to hook me up with the Hulk I always wanted. And, well, I checked out his store, and it's pretty awesome. If you haven't been and you're in the Piedmont Triad area of North Carolina, trying to speak today, check out the store for amazing original local goods, foodstuffs, and some really cool collectibles too. The Mercantile Exchange is on Pleasant Valley Road in North Carolina. I've often said one of the best parts about this channel is the feedback I get from subscribers. And Nobunga wrote me regarding the change in packaging that is going on at retail, especially while Hasbro, I think, is taking the lead here, where a lot of toys that had plastic blisters are now being turned into closed box package executions. So here's a perfect example, the same SKU with a closed box or an open blister. The open blister obviously allows moms, dads, parents, collectors, kids, cyborgs to see what they're buying. They can see the piece count, the value, everything is packed out. Toy makers are encouraged to do that. Now, with a closed box, you're relying on an image and callouts. And obviously this is being done for environmental reasons, and it makes sense to eliminate as much packaging. And it's not just being done with one SKU, it's kind of across the board. You can see here how it's executed with the Titan series, the 12-inch figures, just eliminating that window box and having the figure in a pack-out where, well, you can actually stick your finger and grab it, potentially pull it out of the box. All right, and it's being done with collector product too. We've seen this previewed with Marvel Legends that are in the hopper, and as you'll see in a few moments, with Vintage series and Star Wars as well. So, change is coming. Change can be good, change can be bad, change can be maddening. With this in particular, I've expressed before that I had a few concerns, both as a collector and a toy maker. I've been working on the toy industry for over 20 years. But I also come bearing solutions. I don't like to just complain. So what is one of the issues? Well, I think, and many have backed this up that I've spoken to, is the closed box toys are reading as by parents as games. Games are traditionally in closed box because of the piece count. And when parents pick up those Thor figures, for example, and I just did this as an impromptu study once, asking people, yeah, they all thought it was a game. They thought it was a Thor game. They didn't realize it was an action figure. Now, we have seen closed box, quote-unquote, action figures in the recent past. This Velociraptor stem figure from Mattel from Jurassic World is an example, but it was a STEM toy. You had to put it together. The figure came apart. Same with like a Stickfa. Stickfa is another example of an action figure sold in a closed box, but much like that STEM toy that had to be assembled, the fossils, well, Stickfas also had to be assembled. In fact, they were specifically advertised, marketed as a new way to play. So yes, putting an action figure essentially in a game type structure. Games are usually in closed boxes. So specifically what was written, going back to the original letter that kicked off this video, is toys are being destroyed. He is noticing, and this is an image that he sent me, of action figures being ripped apart specifically to see what the figure looks like inside. Now, I've said many times that action figure collectors, adult action figure collectors, represent a very small portion of the total toy industry. So what does it matter if a couple toy collectors do this trying to get to their figures? Well, the problem is the few can leave a huge destruction path in their wake. And yes, if adult collectors go in and rip open every single package, which that's what the email said is he's seeing in stores, well, that's going to be a bigger problem. So, wait, why, though, are toy companies then even doing this if they can see the problems on the horizon? Well, looking at the past, we've had action figures and blisters for pretty much the last 40 years. It started in the mid-70s and hasn't stopped since. Now, sometimes, however, it's not just about a single figure. This is a perfect example. This is this Target exclusive Battle of Hoth set that came out years ago. I bought it. I have it. It's an awesome set. Now you'll notice the figures are all packed out in a giant battle, and this requires a huge bottom blister and window box, a huge amount of plastic. This is a perfect example of the type of toy where this type of plastic isn't required. Again, looking at just single-based figures, what the toy companies are concerned about is it's not the outer structure here or even the window where you're seeing it. It's that inner blister. It's this thing that I pulled it out there. This is what's causing all of, well, I guess the anguish, because it's a large amount of excess plastic that's just being thrown away. For the industry, it's used to hold the figure in package, and believe me, they've looked at every solution, brute force, bullet through the head, magic. How can we possibly eliminate this? And it's tough because you need this in order to show piece count. For collectors, we just usually toss it, except for, occasionally maybe using it as one of Sue Storm's invisible, obstacle weapons against the Hulk. Actually, it does totally work for that, doesn't it? Maybe I will use this. But yeah, there's pretty much no use for it once you've pulled the figure out of the package. It's just there to maintain the figure's value and keep it in position. And obviously, a lot of people are going to look at this as poor waste management because you're producing plastic to sell plastic and throwing away plastic. All right. As an example, let's look at something like Star Wars Vintage Series collection, or you even buying the old figures, where you clearly saw figure and reference image. This is one of the best examples, and it's something that has spilled over to so many different imitators, and I guess you could call it homagers. Well, it's not a word, but you know what I mean. Now, we're seeing this package effect trickle down to this level, where toys where it's been about seeing the reference image and the figure. So here's a modern Star Wars toy using the old branding from the 80s. It's now being converted into closed box. So here we see what's, literally the change. I mean, we're still seeing a photo of the figure in kind of a cool environment, but it's a photograph of the toy, no longer an image from the movie or from the content. People say, well, wait a minute. We've seen Star Wars in closed boxes in the modern line. This has been done before. It can happen again. Well, I actually beg to differ. If you're using this as an example, this Kmart set, when Kmart had these exclusives, this wasn't the original plan. The original plan was that all of these were going to be part of a much larger set. Well, maybe not the scanning crew members, but they had a whole bunch of Endor stuff. It was going to be like this. This one went to Target. But it was going to replicate something like this, where you had a whole bunch of, scout troopers and scout walkers, Ewoks, catapults, etc., and it would have needed a huge amount of blister there to keep everything in place. That's the inner blister plastic that everyone is so concerned about. Kmart at the last minute asked to break these apart just from a price point standpoint. They didn't want to have a $200 set. They wanted to have a $50 set, a $20 set, and two $10 sets, or whatever it came out to. So putting in a closed box like this was a last-minute change. Hasbro, Kmart probably would have way preferred to have something like this for their Scout Walker, but this takes time to develop. And because of the last-minute request to break apart that big set into individual items, everything was put into a closed box. It's a solution. So let's look at closed boxes going back even farther then. So noting kind of, the issue, and it's not just, heck, there's, problems with toys going back all the way to when plastic was first created. This early set allowed kids to actually have uranium at home to experiment with. Come on. I think we've gotten the big problems off the table at this point. Now we're down to worrying about how toys are being displayed, but it's a legitimate concern, more so than the atomic energy. In the 60s, after plastic toys had really taken over, the first reaction was to put everything into a closed box, just like it had been done in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That was mostly because toys weren't made out of plastic, and it was required. There was no other way to do it. Once you had plastic, you no longer needed the closed boxes. Plastic was what allowed the closed boxes to show the toy, because you have a window box. There was no such thing as a window box before plastic. So lo and behold, once toys stop being made out of wood and metal and plastic takes over, that correlates exactly with the creation of the window box. And once the window box was there, you really didn't see anyone go back, except for, as I said, things like that Kmart example, but that was a last-minute change where a closed box is the only solution in that amount of time to design in order to hit your deadline. So yeah, while the original plastic toys were sold in closed box, like, pre-war merchandise, once we were there, we didn't go backwards. But look at the difference, and here's where I bring the solution. These toys from the 80s only had one blister, right? There's no inner blister. They're just sitting there loose in what's called a coffin blister. So my question is, why not go back to that? If you could eliminate the back blister and just have the figures loose, You've therefore eliminated 50% of your problem right there. And the inner blister, especially on those giant packs, often becomes the biggest issue. So yeah, you may no longer be able to have giant window box packaging for, showing an entire battle in a box. But if we look at the way toys were done in the 80s, they figured it out. There was only one blister. And this Masters of the Universe toy, this is actually a really perfect example because there's a creative solution that was used that almost nobody even realizes. If you look right at He-Man's chest in the middle, there is what's called a reverse dimple going in. Well, this was used to press the figure backwards into the card so it didn't jiggle in package. Easy, simple solution. You don't need an inner blister. There are ways to do this. There are ways to keep figures so you can see the price value without having an inner blister tray. So, rightly there, yes, we could get rid of these giant monstrosities that are holding figures, in tons of plastic, while at the same time not losing the price value or the the customer need to be able to see what they're buying, especially if you're going to have adult collectors rummaging through the figure line looking for, rightly so, a good paint job, making sure the figure is actually the figure that it's supposed to be in package. We may not be able to have things like this, where you have a giant plastic window box. I get it. This is a huge waste. But if we have to sacrifice things like this in order to keep figures on blister cards for our collection and for shopping, and mainly to avoid the damage that can be done by a minority that affects the entire shipment, and now none of this is going to sell and is going to sit there on shelf just gathering dust and prevent future figures from shipping. So it doesn't help anybody. We can unclog the pipes, but bring back blisters in a creative way. I hope this video clarified different solutions and why companies are looking for them. Please share this video. Let me know your comments below, your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your dreams. I try to hit the comments as much as I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.